So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon for this webinar entitled Nitric Oxide Miracle Molecule. I'm really excited about this topic, and I'm excited to be doing this webinar live again. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, my name is Brian Sanderoff. I'm a traditionally trained pharmacist. I used to actually own 2 pharmacies in downtown Baltimore at one point. And at some point in my career, I came to realize that I was not helping people the way I really wanted to. And here's the short story on that, is that I had been in my store for 10 years, and I sat down to evaluate how I was really helping people, because I was starting to question that. And so what I did is I took one category of my patients, and for me it was the blood pressure patients, people who were getting blood pressure medicines from me. And I said, all right, I've been giving these people medicines for 10 years now. Is their blood pressure fixed? In essence, could they stop taking their medicine? And I was kind of surprised to realize that the answer was no, that they couldn't stop taking their medicine or the blood pressure would just go right back up. And that made me start to change the way I looked at health and the way that we address health in our country here. And so I think that we make some significant mistakes in medicine, the way we approach our health here, because blood pressure medicines for high blood pressure are not fixing anything. All they're doing is turning the volume down on what your body is trying to tell you. See, high blood pressure isn't really a disease, it's a symptom. It's an indicator that something's out of balance, or in one way or another, you're not interacting with your environment in an optimal way. And your body tries to tell you that with raising your blood pressure. And what do we do with the medicines? We sort of artificially lower the blood pressure. And the body eventually, catches on and says, no, you're not listening to me, and it makes that blood pressure go up again. And this is common, because my experience in practice was that, people who started with one simple medicine for blood pressure, that would do the trick for a while, and then they need a higher dose, and then they need a second medicine or a third medicine. Now, in pharmacy school, I was taught that that was a quote-unquote worsening condition. It's not that at all. It's that we didn't listen to what the body said, or we found a way to quiet the body, and the body found another way to talk. So here's the analogy I always use. If you're driving around in your car and you see that little red oil light on your dashboard illuminate, you have a couple choices. You can take the car to the mechanic, find out what's wrong and get it fixed, or if you want, just take a piece of black tape and put it over the light, and you don't see the indicator anymore. Well, that's what we do in medicine for all of the chronic diseases. Now, I'm not intending to beat up medicine here. I'm a proponent of it. I'm a student of it. I just want to realistically look at the downside of it as well, or the failings of it. So, if going home from work tonight, I'm in a car accident, I'm not going to have them rush me to the acupuncturist. I'm going to have them take me to the emergency room and put me back together. And that's where we're really good in medicine. But for all the chronic diseases of aging, for those of us that are baby boomers and beyond, either above or below, who have seen our parents age in a way that we don't want to, we have to find a different way. And that's the crux of my work. I have been known to make some outlandish statements. Here's one of them. The number one killer in this country is not heart disease. It's not cancer. It's not diabetes. The number one killer is misinformation, not understanding the ramifications of our decisions. And that's what I'm trying to reverse with the work that I do. It's basically just about helping to educate people so they understand the ramifications of their decisions. All right, so that's the background. And again, if you need to get in touch with me, really easy to do. Go to my website. It's right there, wellbeinggps.com. We are your navigation tool to being well. And from the website, you can email me. You can get my number to call me. I'm on the East Coast, and I'm in my office from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, usually. So if you call and you get my voicemail, I'll get back to you. If you email, I can email you back at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm up doing some work. So the topic today is one that I'm very, very excited about. And it's this molecule called nitric oxide. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, just want to remind people, if you have questions, type it into the question box. And if this information is something that you want to share with other people, send it to my YouTube channel. This recording will be uploaded and will be there forever, probably starting by the end of the week. And the YouTube channel is kind of cool. I would encourage you to go and explore. I mean, I literally hundreds of thousands of views there. Some of my videos have had 40 or 50,000 views of them. And if you subscribe, then when new ones are put up, you'll be told about it as well. All right, let's get on with the presentation. Nitric oxide, miracle molecule. So I didn't know if you know this or not, but there's actually such a thing as the molecule of the year. I always laugh when I say that. Now, this is actually from the journal Science. And research into nitric oxide has been going on since the 70s. And in 1992, it was actually voted molecule of the year. And additionally, the Nobel Prize for physiology or medicine was awarded to 3 pharmacologists who had discovered that nitric oxide, that we also call NO, it's a gas, it's a major signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. I'll tell you a funny little story about that a little bit later in the presentation. The significance of this is such that in 1998, Dr. Valentin Fuster, who was the president of the American Heart Association at the time, said, and this is a direct quote, "The discovery of nitric oxide and its function is one of the most important in the history of cardiovascular medicine." That's pretty high praise. So what is nitric oxide? Well, number one, it's a chemical. It's a very simple molecule that consists of one nitrogen and one oxygen molecule together. So it's a gas, and what that means is that it's volatile or unstable, so it only exists for a very short period of time in the blood. We're talking about a few seconds. It's produced in the vasculature. That's your blood vessels, right? So there are various places in the body where nitric oxide is made, but the chief area is in the lining of the blood vessels. So if you think about it, this fact may support the idea that your vasculature, your blood vessels as a whole, is really the largest organ in your body. I know that previously I certainly haven't thought about the 40,000 miles of tubing in your body in that way, but because blood vessels produce a signaling molecule like this, that is one of the definitions of an organ. And I always say, if you want to have a little fun with your doctor, especially if you're a cardiologist, ask your cardiologist, what's the largest organ in the body? And I bet you'll be very surprised to hear something different than your vasculature. Sometimes people say the liver, sometimes people say the skin or the gut, but actually the largest organ in your body is your blood vessels, the vasculature. And what does it do? Well, its chief function is vasodilation. Now, it has many functions in the body, and we'll go over them, but the chief effect of nitric oxide on your blood vessels is to dilate them. So this is how it works. The heart pumps, which causes a surge of blood to begin to flow through the blood vessels. The shear pressure on the inside of that blood vessel from the surge of that blood is supposed to cause the production of this gas, nitric oxide. And that gets produced in the lining of the blood vessels. The signaling function of the NO here is that nitric oxide tells the blood vessels to relax in order to allow this rush of blood to be able to flow more easily throughout the body. So think about how often your heart pumps, somewhere between 40 and 80 times a minute, even more when you're exercising. So you can see that this is a pretty important function, that when the blood starts to go through, this chemical gets made that causes the blood vessel to relax, that allows the blood to go through. And that's important, obviously, right? And medicine has known about this for a while now. Maybe not exactly why or how it all worked until those discoveries in the 90s. But we've had a medicine that we've used in medicine for forever now that's called nitroglycerin. And so we would give it to someone that's having chest pain, and it would immediately dilate the major blood vessels to potentially head off a heart attack. It wasn't until this research in the 80s or 90s that we came to understand why it actually worked, but we knew it did work. Unfortunately, this is not a suitable drug to use consistently. You get headaches from the dilation of the blood vessels in the brain. So here's a little side note to understand, and that's this is why caffeine traditionally has been used as a headache remedy, because caffeine is the opposite of nitroglycerin. It actually is a vasoconstrictor, meaning that it causes blood vessels to actually get smaller. Dilated blood vessels in the brain is what can cause a headache. So when you see these migraine medicines that have caffeine in it, that's because it makes the blood vessels smaller, which then decreases the pressure of those dilated blood vessels in the brain, which is causing the pain. That could be a headache or a migraine or whatever, right? All right, so So here's a funny little story, maybe not so. So those three guys that I told you about earlier, they were working on a drug to help lower blood pressure. The drug that they invented was designed to help increase nitric oxide levels, which in turn would lower blood pressure because it relaxes the blood vessels. And that makes sense, right? So they came up with their drug and they did their testing, and it got to a point in the drug approval process where they could actually start testing it on people on a bigger scale. And so a bunch of it was sent out for use. And unfortunately, some of the people that took it had some problems, some heart attacks, or it wasn't really helping with the blood pressure. And they kind of did a recall of the drug that they had sent out, but people were reluctant to send the drug back to them. And when they investigated to find out why people, especially men, were wanting to keep these little blue pills that they had, they were told about a little funny side effect of the medicine. Of course, you probably get it now that we're talking about the very beginning of the roots of Viagra, and of course, you know the rest of the story. So here's a quote from one of the original researchers. Originally, we were testing sildenafil, which is the active drug in Viagra, as a cardiovascular drug for its ability to lower blood pressure. This is Dr. Brian Klee, who's senior medical director at Pfizer. But one thing that was found during those trials is that people didn't want to give the medication back because of the side effect of having erections that were, harder, firmer, and lasted longer. That's the whole Viagra story. So that's okay, maybe even better, because there are some simple things to do and not do in order to increase your nitric oxide levels naturally, and that's what we're going to talk about as our discussion goes on today. One of the things I just want to point out, though, that in medicine, this is sort of like the holy grail. I mean, if a pharmaceutical company could create a medicine that would increase nitric oxide levels in the blood vessels, not just in some nether regions of the body, but in the major, arteries, this would be a blockbuster. This would, blow every other medication out of the water as far as value and, prescription use and all that kind of stuff. But medicine has not been able to make any of those new advancements. But that's okay, because as I said, there's some natural ways that we're going to talk about today that are going to just astound you, and some things to avoid doing that also interfere with it. So let's talk about some of the biological functions of nitric oxide. So we talked about vasodilation. Nitric oxide is also known as EDRF, which stands for endothelial-derived relaxing factor. That pretty much says it all. It's made into endothelials, in the endothelial cells. That's the very thin lining of cells that are the beginning of the blood vessels. So we're talking about blood pressure, cardiovascular health, exercise tolerance and performance, and energy production, and of course, always important, erectile dysfunction. But it has many other functions in the body, like immune functions. Certain immune cells also make nitric oxide, which in turn can modulate immune function and also have a direct effect on killing bacteria. The same potentially goes for cancer cells. And so nitric oxide is cytoprotective for your cells, meaning that to protect your cells, and cytotoxic for cells that you don't want around, meaning cancers, bacteria, viruses, that kind of thing. Pulmonary function. People that live at higher altitudes actually make more nitric oxide so that their lung vasculature can dilate that much more to allow for more oxygen in an environment where less oxygen is actually available. This is a good one. Modulation of the hair cycle. So this is an interesting one, and it explains why minoxidil, which is another actual blood pressure medicine with a funny side effect, can potentially help with hair growth. There's gastrointestinal effects, especially in the realm of GI motility, things moving along the way that they're supposed to. And then there are some central nervous system effects as well, including help with memory and sleep. So as you can see, this little miracle molecule that we may naturally think of as important for cardiovascular health has a lot of other effects in the body that are really, really important. All right, how are we doing so far? I don't see anybody typing any questions in. Either I'm speaking way over everybody's head, or I'm just doing such a good job that you guys are getting it all. I hope it's number 2. All right, so how is nitric oxide made? And this is really, really important. Thanks for the feedback, Chris and Deb, I appreciate that. This is really, really important to understand, and this is usually the part of the program where I kind of apologize for the over-technical biochemical discussion that we're about to have, but I'm all about that education, and I think it's really important to understand these things so that you can know how your decisions that you make, simple decisions that you don't even think about having ramifications in other parts of your body, I'm going to give you one of those big ones, and it is a big one that you don't even recognize as an issue. So that's why it's important, I think, to understand this. So the story starts with a very simple enzyme, which is called nitric oxide synthase, or NOS. And sometimes we'll put the little letter E before it if we're talking about the nitric oxide synthase that is in the endothelial cells. That is eNOS instead of just NOS. So this is the enzyme that's needed to actually make nitric oxide. And this happens when an amino acid, which is called L-arginine, gets converted into a different amino acid called L-citrulline. This will become important in our discussion about what supplements can be helpful in making nitric oxide a little bit later. Understanding all the factors involved will help dispel some misinterpretations of the science and why taking just arginine as a supplement is likely not to help as much as we've been led to believe with nitric oxide. Then there's this pathway that's called nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide. And this is the food approach to increasing nitric oxide levels. And so there are certain foods that are sources of nitrates. Chief among them are green leafy vegetables like spinach or arugula or even beetroot. In the mouth, bacteria there convert the dietary nitrates into nitrites. In the stomach, when exposed to the acidic environment, nitrates are converted into a few different compounds, one of which is actually called nitric oxide, which gets absorbed right into the bloodstream. Some of the other compounds in the presence of antioxidants will also get converted into nitric oxide. This is one reason why antioxidants can be helpful for cardiovascular health, and also why some of the studies might show no effect for antioxidants with cardiovascular health, because those studies are not controlling for the other things that are needed, including the bacteria in the gut and in the whole GI tract. So if you see a study that said, vitamin C or vitamin E or coenzyme Q10 or other antioxidants don't do anything for heart health, it's because they're not controlling for other factors that are needed along with those antioxidants. All right, so why is it that nitric oxide levels will fall? There's a lot of factors here. Number one is aging. Studies show that nitric oxide production at the age of 40 is only 50% of what it was at the age of 20. And women may actually have it a little bit worse here. Studies show that by the age of 50, nitric oxide levels are only 35% of what they were in their 20s. Okay, here comes one of those big ahas. Are you ready? Mouthwash is a major reason why nitric oxide levels can fall. And just think about this now. As I mentioned, it's the bacteria in the mouth and saliva that convert nitrates into nitrite. That's the middleman in this making of nitric oxide. And using mouthwashes that kill bacteria do just that. They kill bacteria, not just the bad bacteria, not just the bacteria that are causing bad breath, but the bacteria that are important for helping your body convert ingredients in those green leafy vegetables into this very important chemical in the body. There are certain prescription medicines that do the same thing, and there's two very important categories here. Obviously, number one is antibiotics, just like we talked about. Antibiotics kill bacteria, and that means all over the body. And unfortunately, these antibiotics don't target just the specific bad guys. So wiping out the good bacteria in the gut and the mouth make it impossible to make nitric oxide out of the dietary sources of the precursors. And so I would contend that there are people listening right now who are really good about their diet. They make sure that they're getting those green leafy vegetables, spinach and the arugula. Maybe even they take supplements like beetroot because they've heard it can be helpful for their heart and for their overall health. And yet you use mouthwash, or you've been on antibiotics. I usually like to show a hand, have a show of hands here. You can do this while you're listening too, at your desk or wherever you happen to be right now. Who here right now has had an antibiotic over the past couple weeks? I'm looking out there. Oh, I see a couple hands raised, that's all. All right, who here has had chicken, beef, or tap water in the past couple weeks? Well, chances are all of you people that just raised your hands are getting exposed to antibiotics without even realizing it. Do you know what's in tap water? Chlorine. Why do we put chlorine in there? To kill the bacteria. So there's lots of factors that beat up the good bacteria. Deb said she's drinking tap water right now. That beat up the good bacteria that have this secondary effect of actually making it harder for your body to make nitric oxide. All right. The other category of the prescription medicines are the medicines that cut down on acid in your stomach, because as I said, nitrate to nitrite, and in the stomach, nitrites, when converted to stomach acid, gets converted into a couple different things, including nitric oxide. And how many commercials do you see for the drugs that cut down on acid in the stomach, or how many people here have had reflux and have been told that they have too much acid in their stomach, and so you take one of those medicines? You can take the H2 antagonists like Zantac or Pepcid, or you can take the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors, which are the more effective ones, the second generation of these kinds of drugs, like Prilosec or Prevacid. So those medicines, sorry, I just got a little note here saying the audio is very low. I don't think I made any change here. Everything on my thing looks the same, so maybe that was just your computer. Those medicines in that category of drugs is a huge problem. And in fact, there was an article written last fall, I think, that I saw in the Washington Post, and it was talking about how people are taking that are on those PPIs, stands for proton pump inhibitors like Prilosec or Prevacid or Axid, are more likely to suffer from heart attacks. Well, here is the simple biochemical explanation for why. You need the acid in your stomach in order to complete the conversion of your food source nitric oxide precursors into nitric oxide. And I still, even though I've been doing this work for decades now, I sometimes scratch my head and wonder how our medical scientists actually got to sleep through their basic biochemistry classes when they were in school, because this is basic, simple biochemistry. One other factor that I want to point out that will beat up your nitric oxide levels: smoking. And that shouldn't be a surprise that there's a connection between smoking and cardiovascular disease. And it's not just the smoke, it's this other effect, or this is maybe a little deeper understanding. All right. So how can we raise our nitric oxide levels? Well, there's, three different basic categories or areas that I'll discuss today. And this will be the bulk of the rest of the discussion. And this is important stuff here. So number one is you can do it with prescription meds. You can do it with diet and lifestyle changes. You can do it with supplements. And my recommendation is to understand all of these and choose the ones that will work best for you and will, work within your paradigm about how you want to be healthy, right? All right, so let's talk about the prescription stuff first. And so, as I said, medicine called nitroglycerin. We've been using it for years in medicine. Someone starts to have chest pain or angina, and they have a prescription, and they have these little tiny pills, and they put one underneath their tongue, and it's supposed to dilate the blood vessels immediately. And the reason that you're having that chest pain is because the heart is not getting enough oxygen, and it goes into a cramp. And sometimes that's the beginning of literally a heart attack. And so, it can feel like someone's literally like an elephant sitting on your chest. And so you take this nitroglycerin, you put it underneath your tongue, you wait for 5 minutes. If you still have the pain, you do it again. Wait another 5 minutes. If you still have the pain, you do a third one. After another 5 minutes, you still have the pain. You're supposed to, call the ambulance to come take you to the emergency room because you're having a heart attack. But the problem again with this is that you get terrible headaches from that. It's short acting. It's not suitable to be used on a regular basis. And then there's all of the class of drugs that we found that help increase nitric oxide levels in certain nether regions that help with erectile dysfunction. So Viagra and Cialis and Levitra, all of those drugs do that. And then there's also that one called minoxidil. And that one, again, sort of accidentally, it was marketed as a blood pressure medicine and does get used occasionally as a blood pressure medicine. But for the most part, it gets used topically to help with hair growth because nitric oxide plays a role with that as well. So this is all that the pharmaceutical world has to offer. None of these are good long-term, answers for trying to constantly keep our nitric oxide levels elevated. Okay, how about diet? Lifestyle, diet and exercise. Okay, so number one, green leafy vegetables, and especially spinach and arugula. And I also want to point out that it's the chewing action that plays a role in activating and converting the nitrites into the nitrates. It's really important to get that. And so I'm not 100% convinced that juicing with the green leafies gives you as much benefit as actually eating the green leafies, because when we juice and then we drink, saliva and contact with that food in our mouths happens to a much quicker degree. And I think it's the chewing action of a mouthful of these green leafies that gets that whole thing happening more effectively, right? And so, that means we should be eating a salad every day if we can. And it should have a variety of green leafy vegetables in there, right? Specifically beetroot, and this is a very rich source of the nitrites. And you are starting to see beetroot supplements on the market now. I have a patient of mine that just dropped a label off to me yesterday that is certified organic beetroot juice, wanting to know if this would, be adequate to help with this issue. And there are some products now. My understanding of the industry, within the industry and the supplement industry, is that not all beetroot products are the same, and there are some companies who have some sort of patented process that and patented or individual source of the beetroot that gives you more of the nitrites, which starts this whole conversion thing. Abby was asking a question, and that is, raw or cooked, does it matter? That's a really good question, and I don't fully know the answer to that. I don't know that any studies have been done showing that cooking the green leafies makes them any less of a source of the nitrites. What I would say is, from a dietary perspective, either or, however you can get those. I have a tendency to like more raw and salads, especially this time of year. And when it starts to get colder, I prefer more warming foods. And so in that case, I'll use steamed. If you are cooking them, steaming them is the way to go. It will help, maintain its integrity the best. Good question there. Thank you for that. Exercise. It's kind of like that use it or lose it thing. And when you are exercising and causing your heart rate to go up, which then causes more of those surges of blood to go through your blood vessels from your heart, that encourages your body to make more nitric oxide to deal with that excess load. And so it's very important to get exercise on a regular basis. And then the last thing on here, lifestyle-wise, is that thing with the mouthwash and antacids. So the mouthwash thing is significant, and that is a purely, I don't know how to put it. It's a purely American kind of, permutation and paranoia that we build into our society that, gets us worrying about our breath in front of other people or with other people, and then we start going to all of these huge supposed answers that cause other problems down the road. And so the whole Listerine thing, and killing 99.9% of the bacteria or whatever, you don't want to do that. There's a company called Life Extension. I'll mention them a little bit more in relation to products and a particular product to help with nitric oxide. But they also make two specific probiotics, and one of them is for mouth health, and one of them is for throat health, and one of them is for gum health. And these are, probiotic pills that you just put underneath your tongue and let dissolve in your mouth. And I can tell you, since they came out, 6 months ago or so, right at the beginning of the winter and the cold season, a lot of my patients ended up not getting strep throat or having problems when they started to feel that tickle that they knew was turning into something. They would start using these probiotics, and it would just clear things up. And so that's a really good one. Let's see. Deb is saying water flossers might be a good option, right? Because then you're getting rid of it Yeah, but as you said, don't use the tap water. That's a good one. Yeah, but those water flossers can clean out the teeth and the gums and at the gum line better, so that way you're not having as much of a problem with that. Let's see. Karun is saying mouthwash means cleaning with washers or brushing before sleep. Yeah, so it's more the mouthwash, like the Listerines or the some of the other brand names that are supposed to kill the bacteria. That's why you use them. Brushing your teeth does kill some of that bacteria as well. And so what I do is, I will use those specific probiotics for the gums. A half an hour or 45 minutes after brushing teeth to sort of get that bacteria back in the thing where it belongs. Let's see. Jessica's asking, is there any gum that is bad? You mentioned mouthwash is bad and people use it for bad breath. Well, yeah. So if the gum is just a mint or something to freshen the breath, that's better for you. Although the essential oils that are in those oftentimes are antibacterial as well. So that can have a downside also. And then Sandy was asking, so does chewing gum have the same effect as mouthwash? It can, depending on what's in that gum. If it's just the downside is there's oftentimes sugar or artificial sweeteners or whatever in that. And Josh is asking me, what were the names of the probiotics that you put under your tongue? The company is called Life Extension, and I'll think of the name of it in a second. Sorry about that. All right, so let's continue. Thanks for those questions. I appreciate that feedback. And so how about supplement-wise? What about raising your nitric oxide levels using supplements? And so a couple of important areas here. So number one is this understanding of arginine versus citrulline. And previously, and still, there are a lot of people who believe that if you take arginine as a supplement, that will increase your nitric oxide levels. And some people use arginine to help with muscle building because nitric oxide plays a role with recovery from working out and helping to oxygenate and get that pump while you're lifting. Some people will use arginine for the erectile dysfunction thing, and it's likely to not be as helpful as you think it is. Now, the reason that was thought to be helpful is because it's when the body converts from arginine to citrulline that nitric oxide is released, and it's that it's that enzyme NOS, nitric oxide synthase, that does that conversion. All right. But just having blood levels of arginine doesn't help fuel that pump. And that's the problem here. It's not getting into the cells or the lining of the blood vessels, the endothelium. So this is best done by actually taking advantage of a cycle or a pathway that happens within the kidney where citrulline and arginine are converted back and forth to each other, releasing nitric oxide in the process. And so supplementing with that second thing there, which is called L-citrulline, will help prime this arginine pump and allows the arginine to get into the cell's lining of the blood vessels where nitric oxide has its greatest effect. And interestingly, watermelon is an excellent source of citrulline. So most of the supplements that are most helpful for nitric oxide either have a combination of arginine and citrulline in it or just citrulline. And I'll talk to you about a couple specific supplements in a second. Number two, and my notes here say that I wrote these long technical sounding names in an attempt to sound more intelligent. So did that work? Proanthocyanidins and polyphenols. And so these are the components of many foods, and certain grape and cranberry extracts have superior amounts of these important nutrients, and they're very potent antioxidants. And remember that one of the mechanisms to convert the food source nitrites into nitrates and then nitric oxide happens in the presence of these antioxidants. And so these chemicals have also been shown to have a direct positive effect on vascular health, and this is exactly why. Okay, supplements, beetroot powder, as we talked about. But I will tell you that not all beetroot powders are made the same. And so, and it's not necessarily with the processing, it happens to be that it's the source of the beetroot. And there are some companies who claim that theirs are better than others. And so the whole beetroot supplement route is one that I've avoided until we have a better understanding of really what's worth the money and what isn't. And then there's probiotics, that ever important good bacteria. And again, this plays because of the role that the bacteria plays in that whole nitrite to nitrate to nitric oxide pathway there. So it's really important to get that. And I would refer you to my YouTube channel. There's a whole webinar on probiotics. Very important to understand that as well. All right, got a bunch of other questions coming in, and then I want to talk about some specific supplements because I'm about answers, and I just want to give you the straight answers here. So, okay, so number one, what are alternatives to antacids? That's a really good question, Christine, and I appreciate that. And so the quick answer is there's no quick answer. There's no simple answer to that. It's much more complicated. And the next webinar that I'm going to do live, which is in the fall, I think it's 3 months from now, is on reflux and this whole problem because we've had a big misunderstanding. So the short story is that it is very rare to have too much acid in your stomach. And if you've been to a doctor and the doctor tells you, oh, you have too much acid in your stomach, and he hasn't done a very specific test where they actually take this little capsule and you swallow it and it measures, the acid content in your stomach, then that doctor is not representing the facts properly. Very rare to have too much acid in your stomach. The problem is the acid is not staying in the stomach where it belongs. And it's a classic Western medicine thing that we do. We ask the wrong question. With this problem of reflux, heartburn, that kind of thing, we've asked the question, what can we do to cut down on acid in the stomach? It isn't the question we should have asked. We should have asked, what can we do to keep acid in the stomach where it belongs? See, it really has to do with that valve. That's the top of the stomach. It's called the lower esophageal sphincter, LES. And when that LES is not closing properly, then stomach contents come up into the esophagus, and that's why you get a burn, because that tissue is not built to withstand exposure to acid the way the stomach is. So what is it that makes that valve not close properly? All sorts of things. Hidden food sensitivities, imbalance of good bacteria in the gut, being overweight, stress, hiatal hernias. There's a whole bunch of things. And so, the next webinar that we do, it will be about that specific product. Let's see. Francesca is asking, can aloe vera gel be helpful for mouth washing? I don't know what it'll do to kill the good bacteria. Aloe vera can be very soothing and healing for gut tissue, and we oftentimes will use that, but I don't know if that's really going to help with the bad breath thing. I don't know whether it's Karen or Karun. Sorry about that. What antacids? Oh man, I'm talking about things like Tums all the way up to the prescription medicines that you may get to cut down on acid in your stomach. Chris was asking, what are L-arginine food sources? So watermelon is a source of L-citrulline. Any animal protein will be a source of arginine. That's usually one of the one of the amino acids that gets released when you break down an animal protein. And you also will see arginine on the labels of any protein supplement. And then there are people who take arginine separately just by itself. Okay, Francesca, does acid depend on gluten? It may, and it's not really, again, the acid is not the issue, it's that valve not closing properly. So when I say hidden food sensitivities, that's one of the things I'm talking about. That's one of the issues there. And so, and gluten is a common offender, although I'm a big fan of getting off of grains completely. And again, I would refer you to my YouTube channel and find the webinar that says living grain free. That's a really good one. And that will explain to you why grains are really we were not designed to have grains as a staple in our diet, and the downside to that. And one of those is the reflux. All right, so this is from Jacob. He says, a lot of workout supplements have both caffeine and arginine and other vasodilators. Will these counteract against one another, and does this cause harm to your body? So first of all, the reason that caffeine is in there is because it gives you that lift in the pump, and that helps with the adrenals, or that, affects the adrenals in releasing adrenaline. But caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It's not a vasodilator. And so, yes, those products are designed to make you feel something, just like if you, drank a Jolt soda or, a double cappuccino, but effect-wise, that's in your head and it really doesn't help you in lifting. these products that I'm going to talk about in a second, these specific supplements, I've got some experience with some weightlifters, and they get a true pump when they use these before they work out, and then they get the results of that. They gain the results of that. Karun, animal proteins mean milk? Well, yeah, although not the biggest fan of dairy in the world, but anything that comes from an animal. So whether you're talking about chicken or fish or eggs or beef or lamb or whatever, all of those are considered animal proteins. Milk is as well. Animal proteins are complete proteins, meaning that they give you the amino acids that your body cannot make. They're called the essential amino acids, and there's basically 8 of them, and any animal protein is a source of those. Chris, what are some recommended supplements for NOS? I take several types, and there's a toxic level of NOS in the body. Is there a toxic level? I do not think that there's a toxic level. I mean, I guess technically taking to its extreme, if your blood vessels are too relaxed, then your blood pressure would bottom out and you can die from that. But that doesn't happen from supplementation, and I've never seen any indication of that happening. Interestingly enough, though, that does happen and did happen with Viagra, and that was the big thing that happened. A lot of people feel that that real drug testing doesn't happen during the testing. It happens when a drug gets released to the market and people go crazy. And that's what happened with Viagra. We did our testing and we saw it, and then we released it to the public, and all of a sudden we found that people that were taking Viagra along with nitrates were, some of them, dying because their blood pressure completely bottomed out, and literally they died. And so you will see all sorts of warnings on those medicines now that you don't take it with nitroglycerin or other nitrates, and that's a category, a few different categories of prescription medicines. But I've never seen that happen, or never seen any report of that happening with supplements. And that's one of the good things about using supplements for this sort of problem or this sort of issue, is that we're relying on the wisdom of the body. We're not trying to control nature. We're trying to augment nature. And then Karun says, for vegetarians, good question, and that's a tough one. And so green leafy vegetables, and and so you look to prime the pump of making nitric oxide through your diet with the green leafy vegetables, and making sure that the bacteria in your stomach is proper and that you're getting antioxidants. All right, so let's talk about a few specific supplements. Now, and I'm also going to tell you about an offer that I put together right before I got on the air that you can get to through the website if you want to experiment with this a little bit. Okay, so number one is this product that's called Nitric Oxide Ultra by a company called Pure Encapsulation. So this is a powder that provides a good dose of L-citrulline along with a patented source of those proanthocyanidins and the polyphenols called Cranload. And you would take one of these, it's a little packet, into water a day, sometime in between meals. You could do it in the morning every day, or if you're working out later in the day, you could do it, an hour before you work out or whatever. And I have used this product clinically for circulation and blood pressure issues with really, really nice results with my patients, and that's probably been for about 2 years now. Another one is called Nitro Vasc by a company called Life Extension. And so this is a very specific extract of sweet orange peel that offers unique benefits. One measure of endothelial function in a real-time fashion is called flow-mediated dilation, or FMD. And this is basically a measure of how the blood vessels are responding to the pressure of blood flow through them. And studies with the ingredient that is in this Nitro Vasc show significant increases in the FMD. In other words, increasing the ability to make nitric oxide. Nitro Vasc also has been shown to reduce some other important chemicals that mediate inflammation within the blood vessels, which is another precursor to this whole thing. And then, of course, number 3, you're going to get it, is probiotics. And the one that I use is by a company called Healthy Origins. And the reason I like this product is because, number one, it's very potent. It's 30 billion bacteria per capsule. We call them colony-forming units. And that is guaranteed till time of expiration. If you're taking a probiotic, number one, look at the potency. Even ones that look like they're potent, like, I've seen other ones on the market that are 30 or 40 or 50 billion per capsule, but you'll see a little asterisk next to it. And then when you find that asterisk on the bottle, if you can find it, it says at time of manufacture. And what that means is by time the product makes it from the manufacturer to the wholesaler, to the retailer, to you, oftentimes there's significantly less, sometimes no, live bacteria in there anymore. This product by Healthy Origins, one of the reasons I like it is because, one, It's very potent, 30 billion, and that is guaranteed until time of expiration. And the expiration of the bottle I have in my hand right now is 2 years from now. Number two is that it's completely shelf stable. It does not require refrigeration. And to me, that's really important because the way my life works, out of sight is out of mind. And if I have something that's in the fridge, I don't remember to take it as often. So I want it on the counter just, along with everything else. And then number three, the bacteria that are in there, it's an 8-strain formula, and those bacteria have been engineered to be resistant to the acid in your stomach. And so that way, it will survive the trip through your stomach into the rest of your gut. And so, it's much more effective. And the last thing is cost effectiveness, very, very cost effective for what it is. So let me just tell you about this little special that I kind of put together for you. All three of those things together. So there's the Nitric Oxide Ultra, which is these little powder packs. We call them stick packs. And then there's the Nitro Vasc, and then there's the probiotic. That all of them together is about a month's supply. If you were to buy each one individually at the regular retail, it's like almost $110. We discount each one individually, but if you go to my website and go to the store, the shopping cart, and type in Nitric Oxide Care Kit, all three of those things together, it's $66.80. That's the price for all three of them, and so that's a fairly significant savings from the suggested retail for all those. And so the only way you know about it is this. It's not something that we advertise anywhere else. And so if you're listening today, or you happen to be listening to a recording of this, you can go to the website and take advantage of that. And would love your feedback. And my experience is, you give that 2 months, you're going to see a difference in, well, it depends on what's going on with you: blood pressure, immune function, your workouts and your recovery from your workouts, all sorts of things. And like I said, this is the kind of thing that should also help with all of those other nitric oxide issues like erectile dysfunction or whatever. All right, so let's hit some other questions here. So this is from Francesca again. I switched NO boosters working on arginine and citrulline for those that produce NO on nitrates and nitrates, digestion of eaten food as extract of noni plant. What's the difference? Well, the way that I approach it is that you want to do the dietary thing, and that's why you want to take the probiotic, because that will really help guarantee that the efforts that you're making dietary-wise will help. And then it's the citrulline that's really the key, and the antioxidants that come from, very specific, either grape or cranberry or whatever. This is from Karun. Supplements are for those who are not active with exercise, or for all? No, it is for all. And you'll even find that people who exercise, my experience with a lot of my patients is that those who do exercise notice that their exercise activity and their recovery after the exercise is much better when they're on a regimen like this. And what was it? How do we know if there's excess of NO? Now, it's really, I don't think it's possible for you to know that you wouldn't have excess. The easiest way to know if you have an excess of nitric oxide will be if your blood pressure were too low. And from the supplements, it just doesn't happen. That can happen with prescription medicines. It can happen with combination of prescription medicines, but I just have never seen it happen, and I've not seen any indication in the medical literature of it happening from supplements. Because with supplements, you're using the body's own wisdom instead of trying to control nature, which is what we do in medicine. Here's a question from Jen. Do probiotics need to be gender specific? No, they don't. It depends on what's going on. There are probiotics that we will use specifically for women if they're having specific problems, whether that's urinary tract issues or some sort of vaginal issues. And so there are women probiotics that we will use that are different strains that help to live in different parts of the body. But for general and for gut probiotics, it's the same men and women, it doesn't matter. Karuna is also asking, will there be any impacts for excesses of NO? And like I said, lower blood pressure would be the only thing. And it just doesn't happen with the supplements. Are there products in your care kit okay for teenagers? Yes, absolutely. So, and also that's important, because the beginning of the process of what ends up as being cardiovascular disease starts much earlier than we think it does. And so the habits that we have laid down as teenagers in this country are the ones that have led to the problems. And this is why I think we're seeing cholesterol, obesity, cardiovascular issues happening earlier and earlier. You know, it used to be that you had to be older before you start to see those problems, and now we're seeing them in younger and younger people. And so, yes, this is the kind of process that would help, especially for athletes. And there's nothing funky in here. There's nothing here that that NCAA would have a problem with, or any high schools would have a problem with, or professional teams for that matter, that would have a problem with, that would not be legal. They're all really simple ingredients that make perfect sense, perfect biochemical sense, and would be extremely safe for that. Let's see, Joshua, were these 3 supplements the ones you were saying earlier that you'd put under your tongue to prevent strep? No, that's a different one. And Joshua, I'm sorry. Like I said, they're made by Life Extension, and one of them is called throat probiotic, and the other is called gum or oral probiotic. And there's a name before it, and it's just escaping me right now. But if you email me, I'll tell you exactly, the name of it and where you can find it or whatever. So everybody, thanks so much. Oh, let's see. One more. Jen, search for nitric oxide care kit in store, getting odd results like baby starter kit. Well, that's not right. Okay, well, give it a couple minutes, and as soon as I get off the webinar here, I'll check and make sure that it's working right. Thank you all for being here. I really do appreciate it. That was an hour that went really fast. A lot of information here. So a couple things. One, go to the website. Get in touch with me if you have specific questions. You can email me right from there, or my office phone number is all over the website as well. If you go to the archives from our YouTube channel, you'll find webinars on all sorts of different topics, like what you see there: stress, or weight loss, or sleep, or the cholesterol myth. Everybody, and we'll be doing this again live in the fall, and we'll be talking about reflux. I hope you all join me then as well. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Take care.